Thanks for having me.
Well, let's jump right in because, I've been on the website. I get your newsletter. If people don't get it, they need to go there and sign up. But you really did a whole new business at the age of 60, I believe, right? You're in that mindset of like, I'm not done yet. That's not even in my mind. So talk a little bit about your history and where this all came from.
Well, actually, I was in the fashion business for the bulk of my career. And then we moved to Los Angeles. We had lived in New York, moved to Los Angeles. We bought a home. I kind of went crazy. I was excited to have space and entertain and decorate. And that actually led to my first business at 53, which was One Kings Lane, which is a online home decor business, although they do have some brick and mortar stores now. Anyway, I did that for about 7 years. We built that business, to a point where we ended up selling it to Bed Bath & Beyond in 2016. And when we did that, I started hearing all these rumblings that you were talking about in the beginning of the segment. A lot of my friends, talking about how they felt invisible, irrelevant. I have a couple friends posted pictures on Facebook, hashtag at 50 we're not invisible. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, because I wasn't feeling it. That I was something, I think because I'd had this, venture One Kings Lane, I was so heads down into that. And I didn't even think about like my age or anything like that. And then when I got out of that, I started hearing this from a lot of people around me. And I thought, who's speaking to women like us digitally? Like, where are women hanging out? What's happening online? And when I started doing my research, I found that, there's AARP, which is this like amazing organization, but what didn't speak to me, it speaks to plenty of people on one end, and the other end kind of fragmented world of, bloggers and, people like that. But there really wasn't a go-to brand for, just call it women over 50. And so I thought, it seems like there potentially is an opportunity here. And when I started digging into the demographics, it turns out that women over 50 are a very large, very fast growing demographic. We own a tremendous amount of wealth in this country, and we are super consumers. We spend 250% more than any other demographic out there. And I said, I think there's an opportunity here.
I think so. I mean, from a business aspect, and then also obviously just from a conversation aspect. I mean, it is a different conversation. And even if you're on social media, it's a different type of conversation that's being had there.
Right.
And I think it's important that you're not comparing yourself or, to 25-year-olds. And I often find myself doing that, until I've started to gravitate toward an age where we're having a different conversation.
Well, it's hard not to compare yourself to 25-year-olds, right? Because that's all that's out there. There aren't any, that was kind of my point. Like when you look out there, where do we go? Where do we go to get, inspiration? Who can we look to? Because, our generation is a whole new deal. There's never been a generation like ours before. We're healthier, we're wealthier, we're more engaged than any other, generation, prior to us. And so we have no examples. We are setting the examples. And so it makes it a little tricky. And that's one of the things we're trying to change. Like, you don't need to compare yourself to 25-year-old. Maybe you get some good fashion ideas from them that you can interpret, but you don't need to look like them or act like them. And actually, I think they need to learn a little bit from us too. So it's not a one-way street.
Yeah, I agree, because I think that it's nice to have somebody to look to, as you're growing up and as there's a role model there, because I don't, that this is a different time. Just everything totally is a different time. Yeah. It's also interesting though, with regard to advertisers and marketing. And we talked about this the first time that we were introduced. Because I don't know that the advertisers realize how big that this segment of the population is, and I think they're learning about it. And I do see a difference in some of the advertising, which gets me excited.
I mean, we're 2 years old, and I've seen a big change. The advertisers totally get it. They know, they understand what the demographics are. I think what has happened is this is a little bit of a hangover from, just call it Mad Men advertising days, because back in the day, advertisers, when people turn 49, 50, they're like, we don't need to target you because, your brands, you're locked and loaded on your brands. If you use Crest toothpaste, you weren't switching to Colgate. But that's not the world today, because there's constantly new brands and better brands and things coming along. And we're very open to trying it to make ourselves feel better and look better. And so I think it's taking a little bit of time, but I think they're starting to get it. And I think, over the next, hopefully 5 years, we'll see a big, shift, and they will start to spend more money targeting us and talking to us and showing us the way we all think of ourselves,
Well, I know you have and I love this on the website. The first time somebody introduced me to the website, they said, you got to go check it out. And I clicked on it and it said Menopause Registry. And I went, I love it. I love it because it's got some humor, and it's got some seriousness, and it's got some shopping, and it's got some lifestyle, and it has that, oh yeah, that's me too. And I think that that's really important, to be able to see yourself.
Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, there's a place, and there's lots of really great, serious sites with like really good,
Sure.
deep content. That's not like who we are. We are a little irreverent. We definitely like to laugh. I think at this point in our lives, if we're not smiling and having a good time, even through the tough times,
Yes.
and holding each other's hands, kind of, that's really what this is all meant to be. And, menopause, when we started, this is another one of those things, nobody even said the word. Now, 2 years later, there's actually products that are dedicated to, different symptoms of menopause. There are telemedicine sites for menopause. And we feel like this is a big deal in a woman's life, as big as like when you go through puberty. And we think it's something to be celebrated, and, and you should be prepared for it. And that's why we have the Menopause Registry.
And it's interesting because I wasn't, and I went through. I talked to Joan London in our last episode, and I said, I woke up one morning and I'm like, oh my gosh, I must have a fever. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I have a sinus infection. That's why I'm so hot. Right. But I had no idea. Like I knew it somewhere back there, but I wasn't sure that I still wanted. I still wanted to talk about it. But now I talk about it openly, and it doesn't always make everybody really comfortable if I'm in the TV studio talking about my hot flash. But I got to tell you, I think the more that you're able to do it, and the more that you feel okay with it, it becomes the norm, right?
We have to talk about it, right? I mean, that's because that's why you didn't know what it was, because nobody was talking about it, so you didn't know what to expect. It's like when I went through menopause, and I went to ask my mother, like, what kind of symptoms did she have? How long did it last? She goes, no, I don't know.
I don't remember. I don't know. Right.
Well, there is a memory thing that happens. So I'll give her a little bit of a break on that. But the point is, it's not like she was sitting me down, at some point in my life and saying, listen, this is what happened to me. So just, kind of be, prepared.
Be ready.
It's the same thing about owning your age, right? It's like, if we don't own it, and we don't stop not saying it, and, making up a number, then we're not helping the cause at all, right?
Yeah, I had somebody tell me the other day, like, you shouldn't run around telling people you're 50, and I went, why would I not do that? But I understand where that comes from. I understand where that belief system comes from, but I'm not subscribing to it, and I'm happy I'm not, actually.
I had a similar experience when I was turning 60. I had a big dinner party, and at the time I was doing One King's Land as a dinner for a bunch of designers, and I was sitting next to a good friend of mine, and I said, I'm having a very big birthday in a couple of months. He goes, oh, you're turning 50? I said, no, I'm turning 60. He goes, shh, do not tell anybody that. Don't even mention it yet, And I was like, what are you talking about? I feel great, and I feel really, I'm proud that I was 60 then, I'm 65 now. So it's like, I think we all need to own it. We've been through a lot. We have a lot of experience. We have a lot to share, and we have a lot more to do, the next half of our lives. But got to own that age.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Let me ask you something, because a lot of people have said, we've used the word quite a bit, obviously, since this pandemic, of pivot and reinvention. And I appreciate all those words. However, I don't think they're quite as easy as, as how we say them. You have done that, though. You've done reinventions and pivots. I prefer to call them just kind of as part of your developing story, that we didn't reinvent where we said, oh, that's not important anymore. We've got to do something new and not be who we are. I prefer to think of it as like, here's your next chapter. Here's your story. Keep adding to your story. And you've clearly done that. One King's Lane, which is, one of my I've loved it forever because I've moved to so many different apartments and places in this business. But and now in the groove is, I mean, those are two very big things that you've taken on. Did you do that with a group of people? Did you do it because it was your idea and then you brought people into it who were like-minded? How did you do that? Because I think it's important to help people understand the process.
Well, I think before I talk about how I did it, I mean, I think the way you're describing this is like your next, whatever. It's like you're iterating, right?
Sure.
So like, I don't think it always has to be this monumental pivot or like a huge change. I mean, it could be, because maybe there's something, you had some pent up desire to do something, and now you're at a point in your life where you have the time and the resources to take that on. Awesome. Like, do it. Like, my dad, as an example, at 80 went back and got his MFA and became a painter. And that was something he, like dabbled in his whole life, but never really had the time to, dedicate the time and energy to it. Yeah, it's amazing. Great example. But I think, in my case, and I think one thing that can work really well is like, think about what you're good at and what you really enjoy doing, and how do you iterate that to sort of the next thing. So I have been in, sales and marketing and fashion my whole life. I grew up in a retail family. And so One Kings Lane wasn't really, even though it was a new and an innovative idea, like I took my skill set that I had really, developed my entire life and used that to create, that was my idea. And in that venture, I took a co-founder and we built that into, what it became. But I really leveraged, what I was good at. As a matter of fact, that was why I wanted a co-founder, because I wanted somebody that had the skill sets that I didn't have, which was, my co-founder, Allie Pincus at the time, and she had a completely different skill set than I did, which is great. So we complemented each other. In the Groove was my idea. And again, I think it was leveraging, what I had learned and what I thought, I could do to help other people and to build something that would be fun and new and different. So I don't feel like it was like a huge reinvention or a huge pivot. I feel like it's kind of next act or next step for me. But like I said, some people may have these major pivots. I think it just depends. But I think if you've got a skill set, like think about how you maybe could use that and do something that you would really be good at and enjoy.
Yeah, it's such a good point though with a skill set, because I do see people that sometimes, do a complete pivot, but more often than not, a lot of the really successful ones figure out a way to integrate their skills into that next chapter.
Exactly.
And it's so important. And I think yours is twofold, because it's not just a website, it's also a message. And I think a movement, really. I
mean, that is, that's my dream. It is a movement. We have a hashtag we use, hashtag we see you. And I think like at the end of the day, there's nothing all that serious about what we're doing. We're curating and providing, information and edits about clothes, fashion and beauty and wellness. But I hope that it adds a little bit to changing the conversation around ageism, and which is a really big problem, in this country, and that hopefully all these things add up to, like you said, to like a movement where, age is looked at in a different way in this country.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. I wrote a book about divorce, and I went through my divorce, and I went through it around 40, and then I wound up getting engaged at 50, which, it seems like really, but I thought to myself, I'm not done yet. And so I started working on my next book, and I kept, the phrase I use in the news business, because that's my real job, is coming up next, up next, up next, up next. And I thought, like,
I love that.
That's where I am, but I'm coming up next. Like, what's coming up next? So that, that's kind of where it came from. For me, it's pretty simple words, but the truth of the matter is, it's like, I think we're always looking at that, that's the transition of what's coming up next in our lives.
I love that, coming up next. I mean, I think, the thing about life, I went through this period of time where I thought everything's going to stay the same. I'm going to have the same job. I'm going to live in the same place. My life's going to, it's just going to keep growing from here. But the truth is, that's not reality. Things change, and we're living in this crazy world that is so dynamic anyway. And so I think the more you can sort of be open to doing things differently or changing and stay curious. And I think that's one of, we talk about that a lot on this site. Like, I think the only way way to stay relevant and not visible is you have to be inquisitive and curious and keep learning. And, you can't just sort of say, okay, I'm here, I made it, I'm done. Like, it doesn't stop,
Great.
it just keeps going.
Yeah, I think the lifelong learning is so important, and whatever it is, even if it feels like it's little, I think that
Totally.
input is important, and I think that input is important to your conversation. The words matter, and you've got to have the right ones going on
Right.
in your head. And if you go to In the Groove, you're going to see the right ones because I love it. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, I have to.
The menopause registry I have shared with several people,
Oh,
and
good.
I will continue to do so.